There's a moment in life, quiet, almost unnoticeable, when you stop counting the candles on your birthday cake, and start counting something else: the number of pills in the morning, the stairs you now avoid, the friends you used to call, who no longer pick up. It's not just aging, it's the body whispering secrets it once shouted with ease. After 60, the body doesn't complain loudly, it leaves breadcrumbs. Tiny clues. Quiet changes. Silent warnings, and if you're wise enough, you start listening. Most people don't. They shrug off a flutter in the chest, call memory slips senior moments and laugh them away, blame fatigue on bad sleep or a lazy day. But what if those small signs aren't random? What if they're coded messages from your very biology, delicate signals telling you something is wrong? And time is running out. That's the tragedy of growing older in silence. It's not the gray hair, the aching knees, or the wrinkled skin. It's what goes unnoticed. It's what we normalize. Until it's too late, we live in a world obsessed with youth. Commercials sell wrinkle creams, gyms promise to rewind the clock, but nobody teaches us how to grow old intelligently, how to recognize when aging crosses from natural into dangerous. See, age doesn't kill you, but ignoring age does. After 60, your body becomes like a sacred manuscript, pages full of history, resilience, and subtle warnings scribbled in the margins. And unless you know how to read it, you'll miss the most important messages of your life. Let me tell you about Henry. He was 71. Healthy by all appearances. Retired mechanic, loved gardening, made the best grilled chicken in the neighborhood. One afternoon, while trimming the hedges, he felt a pressure in his chest, not pain. Just pressure. He paused, sipped water, and said, "Probably just indigestion." Must have been the garlic. 2 days later, Henry's wife found him collapsed in the backyard. Massive heart attack, no warning, or so they thought, but the warning was there. It always is. What if someone had told him what that pressure meant? What if someone had said, "That's not gas"? That's your heart waving a red flag. Would he still be alive? We don't tell enough truths to people after 60, not because we don't care, but because we underestimate how loud silence can be, how dangerous just a little tired really is, how deadly "I'm fine" can sound, when it's said too often, too quickly. There are 6 symptoms, 6 deadly signs, that doctors everywhere beg you not to ignore after 60. They're not dramatic. They don't always hurt, but when they appear, they signal something deeper. A countdown. One that can be reversed if you catch it early, but unstoppable if left unnoticed. This is not about fear, it's about power, because knowledge is not just information, it's life insurance, for your soul, and if you're brave enough to face these truths, you may just outlive the very danger that comes with ignoring them. Let's begin with the one that hides in plain sight, the quiet ache that took Henry's life and nearly stole millions more. It doesn't always feel like pain, sometimes. It's just a twinge, a gentle squeezing. A shadow across your chest, so subtle, it almost feels like a deep sigh trapped inside your ribs. You shift in your chair. Rub your sternum, tell yourself, it's probably gas. You drink some water, breathe deeply, and get back to reading the newspaper. And that's how the heart loses its final chance to cry out, not with drama, but with dismissal. Doctors have a name for this feeling: angina, a symptom that often arrives not with a scream, but with a whisper. It's your heart begging for oxygen, a quiet plea before a catastrophe. And here's the cruel part: many seniors, especially men over 60, don't feel heart attacks the way movies show them. There's no clutching of the chest, no collapse, no thunder. Instead, there's discomfort, maybe in your back, your shoulder, your jaw. Maybe you're just tired. You sit down to rest and think, "I'll be fine in a minute." You never consider that your heart is silently drowning. By the time paramedics arrive, if they're even called, the window for survival may already be gone. The truth is heartbreaking, not just because people die, but because they die thinking it was nothing. Let's go deeper. Why does this happen? After 60, the arteries, those vital highways that deliver oxygen-rich blood to your heart, begin to stiffen. narrow, and clog. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens one cheeseburger at a time, one forgotten walk, one skipped blood pressure pill, one decade of I feel fine, so I must be fine. Until suddenly, your heart, once a faithful workhorse, is gasping under the weight of years, and when the pain comes, if it comes at all, it's often when you're doing something small, walking up the stairs, carrying groceries, bending to tie your shoes, not a marathon. Just life, and here's where wisdom becomes your armor. If you feel any of these symptoms after 60, you do not wait, you do not guess, you do not Google, you call, you check, you listen, to your heart, to your body, to the part of you that knows when something just isn't right, because the heart doesn't lie, it never has, it pumps in rhythm with your emotions, it mourns with you, rejoices with you, ages with you, and when it begins to struggle, it will tell you, but only once, maybe twice, then, silence. You don't get to choose whether you age, but you do get to choose how you listen. So when that tightness comes, don't wait for it to become pain, don't wait for it to drop you to your knees, catch the whisper before it becomes a scream, and you may just buy yourself 10 more years of stories, of morning coffees, of watching your grandchildren grow, next time your chest feels a little off. Don't brush it away like a leaf on your shoulder, treat it like a telegram from your soul, because that's what it is, and some messages are far too sacred to ignore. You stand on the scale, and for the first time in years, you smile, 2 pounds down, then 3, then 5, you haven't changed your diet, you're not exercising more, but the numbers keep falling, and everyone says, you look great. They compliment your face, your waistline, they say, you're aging in reverse. But you know the truth, you haven't been trying, and something doesn't feel right. This is the kind of weight loss that comes quietly and steals loudly. It's the body's white flag, a signal that something beneath the surface, in the blood, the organs, or the mind, has begun to fail. Doctors have a word for this: unintentional weight loss. And after 60, it is never something to ignore, because it is rarely ever random, and it is almost never harmless. Sometimes, it begins with appetite. You're just not hungry, you start skipping meals, coffee becomes breakfast, crackers replace lunch, but hunger isn't always about food. Sometimes, it disappears because the body no longer trusts digestion, because it's in distress, because something deeper is changing. Unexplained weight loss in older adults can be a whisper of many things, and none of them are things you want to leave unchecked. It could be cancer, hiding in silence, consuming from the inside, thyroid disease, revving your metabolism into overdrive, heart failure, robbing your body of fuel, malabsorption, where nutrients pass right through, never reaching your cells, or even dementia, where forgetting meals becomes a daily routine you didn't mean to create. But here's what makes this symptom so deceptive: it wears the mask of success. We live in a culture that worships thin, especially for women, especially with age, and so, the more the weight drops, the more the compliments rise, while the truth sinks deeper into the bones. Let me tell you about Rosa. She was 68, mother of 3, widowed young, tough as nails and soft as a lullaby. Over the course of 6 months, she lost nearly 20 pounds. She didn't diet, didn't exercise, but she looked radiant. Her neighbors praised her. She said she felt fine. By the time she went to the doctor, the cancer had already spread, stage 4, and no one had seen it coming, because the weight loss was applauded, even celebrated. Here's what Rosa never knew, and what every person over 60 must understand: your body does not give things away for free, especially not weight, especially not muscle, especially not in silence. So if the pounds are falling away, if the clothes are getting loose, if you're eating the same but shrinking just the same, you must ask why. Not from fear, but from fierce love for your own life. After 60, every pound you lose without trying is a conversation your body is trying to start. It's asking you to notice, to care, to act, because the body remembers everything: the skipped checkups, the hidden stress, the small pain you never mentioned, but it also remembers how to heal, if you give it the chance. So stand on that scale, look at the number, But more importantly, listen for the story behind it, because in that silent subtraction, there may be a final plea, a message written in flesh and bone. Don't disappear without understanding why. It doesn't announce itself like a sudden fever. There's no dramatic collapse, no alarms, no rush to the ER. It creeps in slowly, like fog through a quiet forest. You wake up. And you're still tired. You drink your morning coffee. But the energy never arrives. Tasks that used to take minutes now feel like mountains. You move slower, think slower, and you begin canceling plans. Not out of disinterest, but because even getting dressed feels like too much. But you keep telling yourself the same lie we've all whispered after 60, it's just age. But is it? What if it's not just age? What if it's a message? What if it's the body's cry that something deeper is unraveling, one slow step at a time? Let's be honest, fatigue is normal after a hard day's work, after walking, gardening, socializing, or a sleepless night. But chronic, unrelenting fatigue, the kind that robs your mornings, the kind that makes you forget what refreshed even feels like, that's not normal. That's not just aging. That's a symptom, and sometimes it's a warning. It could be your heart, no longer pumping blood with youthful force. It could be your lungs, gasping quietly beneath the surface, denying your cells the oxygen they crave. It could be anemia, where your blood is no longer rich with iron, turning each breath into a struggle you don't even notice until climbing stairs feels like climbing Everest, or worse. It could be cancer, slowly spreading behind the scenes, using your strength to feed its own. Fatigue can even be a symptom of depression, a silent fog that clouds older adults far more often than people realize. You're not lazy. You're not slowing down. You might just be quietly drowning, and the tragedy, most people over 60 will never say anything. They'll nap longer, cancel more dinners, stop going out altogether, and quietly fold their days into smaller and smaller boxes, until one day, they disappear from the life they used to love, and no one ever suspects fatigue was the thief. Here's the hard truth: when fatigue becomes your new normal, you are not living, you are surviving. But you weren't meant to just survive your older years, you were meant to thrive. To feel lightness in your limbs, clarity in your mind, purpose in your chest. You were meant to rise with energy and lay down with satisfaction, not drag your body through the hours like a rusted anchor. So here's what the wise do: they don't excuse fatigue. They investigate it, they measure it, they listen to it, because fatigue is never just about the body, it is also about the soul. When your energy fades, your spirit dims too. You stop doing what you love, you stop laughing as often, you stop being you, and you are far too precious to fade without a fight. So if the exhaustion won't go away, don't accept it, don't downplay it, don't let it steal another day. Instead, ask yourself, what is this tiredness trying to tell me, and have the courage to answer, before it becomes the story of your final years. At first, it's nothing. You bend down to tie your shoes, and need a moment before standing back up. You climb a single flight of stairs, and feel your chest rising like you've run a mile. You laugh a little too hard, walk a little too far, and suddenly, your lungs betray you. You're reaching for air, but it doesn't seem to reach back, and still, you tell yourself, I'm just getting older. I'm just out of shape. I just need to rest. But here's the truth no one says out loud: when breathing becomes effortful, time becomes precious, because breath is life's silent rhythm. We don't think about it, we don't thank it, but the moment it falters, everything else begins to fall. After 60, shortness of breath is not just an inconvenience, it's not just a reminder to take it easy, it is a red flag, a blinking warning light, and it deserves our full attention. You see, breathlessness can whisper of many dark things, and sometimes, when we don't listen, it begins to scream. It could be congestive heart failure, where the heart can no longer pump blood with strength, and fluid spills into the lungs like an overflowing cup. Pulmonary embolism, a clot traveling through your bloodstream, threatening to block oxygen at any moment, like a thief in the night. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, where each breath becomes a battlefield of shrinking airways and trapped carbon dioxide. Or even lung cancer, which doesn't always cough, sometimes, it simply steals the breath. first slowly, then completely. But here's the cruelest part, shortness of breath doesn't always arrive with drama. Sometimes, it walks in wearing slippers. You don't collapse. You don't panic. You just do less, walk less, talk less, dream less. You avoid hills. You avoid stairs. You stop dancing. You stop singing. And one day, you look up and realize the life you were living has shrunk down to a single chair where you sit, gasping gently, pretending you're fine, but you're not fine. You are running out of time. Breathlessness is not just a symptom, it's a countdown. A quiet one, and it starts ticking long before most people hear it. Let me tell you about Mr. Harold. He was 73, a retired school principal. He loved gardening, but one summer, he started avoiding his flowers. He told his wife it was too hot. He blamed the pollen, then the humidity, but the truth, he couldn't bend over anymore without panting. He couldn't water the roses without sitting down. By the time he saw a doctor, the diagnosis was clear. His heart was failing, the lungs were filling, and he had been losing time with every single breath he ignored. That's what makes this symptom so dangerous. It's not loud, it doesn't hurt, it just quietly robs your life. One breath at a time. So if you notice you're winded walking across the room, if conversations leave you short of air, if lying down makes your chest feel heavy, don't wait, don't explain it away, don't tell yourself this is just what getting older feels like. No, this is what danger feels like, and there is still time to ask, time to check, time to breathe easy again, but only if you choose to face it now, because breath is not a luxury, it's a promise, and if your body is struggling to keep that promise, then it's time to answer the call, before you run out of breath, and out of time. It doesn't begin with a storm, there's no thunder in the distance, no alarms blaring, it starts with a pause, a moment, a hesitation so small you almost miss it. You walk into the kitchen, and can't remember why, you see a familiar face, and struggle to place the name, you misplace a word mid-sentence, and pretend it was never there. These things happen to everyone, right? Yes, and no, because when confusion becomes a frequent guest, when it sits beside you at breakfast, and lingers long into the night, you begin to feel it. The light is dimming, not outside, but inside. After 60, every mental misstep feels heavier. What used to be a silly moment becomes a quiet fear. Is this just age? Or is something breaking? The answer is both simpler, and more terrifying, than we'd like to admit. Confusion is not just forgetfulness, it is the mind waving a white flag, it is the brain's silent cry, not of pain, but of slipping away, and behind this confusion may hide things far more dangerous than we expect, mini-strokes, TIAs, that come and go like ghosts in the night, leaving no scars on the body, but erosion in the mind. Alzheimer's disease, which doesn't just steal memories, it rewrites the soul. Urinary tract infections, surprisingly common in the elderly, that don't cause pain but spark sudden delirium like a wildfire in the brain. Medication overload, where pills meant to help begin to harm, like too many voices in a crowded room, low oxygen levels, slowly starving brain cells of clarity while the body quietly gasps for more. You see, the brain doesn't shout, it dims, softly, subtly, until one day, you find yourself standing in your own home, unsure of how you got there. Let me tell you about Eleanor. She was 79, sharp as a tack, everyone said, read books like drinking water, crossword puzzles, child's play. Then she started repeating herself, asking the same question twice, then 4 times, then forgetting entire conversations. Her family thought it was cute, mom's getting quirky. Until one night, she called her daughter in tears, not knowing what year it was, or how to get home. She was already home. That's how confusion works, not like a fire, but like a slow fog rolling in. You don't notice at first, then, one day, you can't see your own hands in front of you. But here's what matters most, it's not always dementia. Confusion doesn't always mean the end. Sometimes, it means something is treatable, if caught in time. Dehydration, infections, even vitamin deficiencies, they can mimic the scariest forms of mental decline. But only if we notice, only if we ask, only if we stop brushing it off. Because when the light in the mind begins to flicker, it is not a moment for fear, but for fierce action. We must not ignore the early signs, repeating questions, getting lost in familiar places, struggling to follow a conversation, sudden mood swings or bursts of anger, or a quiet withdrawal from the world. These are not senior moments. These are cries for help. The brain is our most sacred compass. When it falters, the journey becomes treacherous, and if we love our elders, or ourselves, we must treat confusion with the seriousness of a heart attack, because the mind matters just as much as the body. If you find yourself confused more often, if reality feels slippery, don't delay, ask, check, act, because once the light fades completely, we may never find our way back. Life after 60 is not a countdown, it's a sacred invitation, an invitation to listen, truly listen, to the quiet language of your body and soul, because the symptoms we fear, the tight chest, the weight loss, the exhaustion, the breathlessness, the confusion, are not punishments, they are messengers, messengers reminding us that life is fragile and precious, and asking us to wake up. Imagine a garden. Each season brings its own gifts and its own storms. When the soil dries, the plants don't scream, they whisper. When the wind bites, the branches don't break, they bend. So too must we learn to bend, to listen to the whispers of our own garden, to stay alive with grace after 60. We must become fluent in this language. We must honor the signals, not fear them. We must seek help early, not wait for the crash. We must choose action, not resignation. This wisdom is not found in youth or strength. It is found in the humility of listening, in the courage to face hard truths, in the grace to ask for help. There is a power in awareness, a power in prevention, a power in hope. Remember Mr. Harold, who faced his failing heart, and found new life in treatment. Remember Eleanor, whose confusion was untangled by care and attention. Their stories are not endings, they are new beginnings. So as you walk forward, carry this truth with you: you are not alone. Your body is speaking, your soul is calling, and there is still time to live fully, to love deeply, to laugh freely, listen, act, live, because the greatest wisdom of all is to know when to hear the quiet call, and answer it with open arms. The dance of life after 60 is delicate, but it is also beautiful, and it is yours.